The Lady Vols have a new head coach. It'll be Kim Caldwell out of Marshall. Just her first year in Division I basketball was last season at Marshall. Now she's appointed the Tennessee women's basketball next head coach. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network, and it's been a mixed reaction. We put it in the forum Thursday night over at VolReport.com. Hey, this is a likelihood of happening. This could happen. She's one of the finalists. We're hearing that this could be the future for the Lady Vols is Kim Caldwell as head coach. And some people, okay, got a young upcoming coach. Good things could come from here. Other people, little skeptical, haven't done it at the top level. Maybe we're hoping for someone a little bit more secure atop the women's basketball landscape. Instead, you get an upcoming young coach, someone that started in Division II and dominated Division II and now finds the way to Tennessee. We're going to weigh the pros and cons. We're going to talk about her path here. We're going to get all of it done. But I want to hear what you guys have to say. Head into the comments here. Head over to volreport.com in the forum. I'm curious what your thoughts on this hire are. It's going to be Kim Caldwell from Marshall taking over the job after Kelly Harper was fired after 5 seasons. Also feel like this is worth noting. You see different last names for her. You see Kim Caldwell and Kim Stevens. Stevens is her maiden name. Caldwell is her married name. So you might see a little bit of both. If you Google her, you'll find a little bit of both. We're going to go with Caldwell for now. We'll see once she gets officially here in Knoxville if she has a different preference. But talking to some people over at Marshall, they say Caldwell is the way to go. So putting that out there as well before we get started. But let's talk about her path quickly to coming to Tennessee. She comes from Division II, and it's Glenville State. That's where she played her college basketball, at Division II Glenville State. She wins a national championship in 2022. She goes to the Final Four in 2023, and then she gets hired by Marshall. She coached 7 seasons over at Glenville State and turned them into a program that was one of the powers in Division II women's basketball, and did that at a young age. That was her first head coaching job. She was an assistant at Ohio Valley from 2011 to 13. She was an assistant at Sacramento State from 2013 to 16. Then she gets that job over at Glenville State, and she does a remarkable job there. Gets them a national championship. And of course, it's not a Division I national championship. You're not going through the top of the top of the top to do it, but it's still a big feat to be able to do that in the fashion she did so early in her coaching career. She goes from Glenville State, and she finds her way to Marshall for her first Division I head coaching job. They went 17-14 the year before her hiring, 9-9 in Sun Belt play. They had made one NCAA tournament before in school history in 1997, the last time that they won a conference tournament title. They hadn't won a regular season title since 1989. She sweeps the table. She takes them to the NCAA tournament, and it really is just an impressive turnaround. 26-7 overall record, 17-1 in Sun Belt Conference play. Like I said, wins the regular season title, wins the tournament title, ends up getting beat pretty badly by Virginia Tech as a 13 seed to the 4 seed Hokies. But all in all, I think it was a pretty impressive turnaround job she did at Marshall. The question that comes up is one season of doing it at Marshall enough to land you one of the most prestigious coaching jobs in women's college basketball, if not the most prestigious coaching job in women's college basketball in Tennessee with the Lady Vols? When this coaching search started, I think a lot of people didn't necessarily have a mid-major coach in mind for who Tennessee would hire. It was someone that's been at the top of this sport, that's maybe won a national championship, that's been to Final Fours, or at least recently at a Power 5, Power 6 school has shown they can win those conference championships, or at least be in contention and have a kind of a track record to fall back on. Kim Caldwell doesn't necessarily have that track record to fall back on. She's young for a coach. She's showing she can win, but she hasn't had to do it at the Division I level for a sustained amount of time. She hasn't had to show in that She can recruit with the powerhouses that she'll have to compete against now for 5 stars, for high 4 stars, to really load up this roster, to utilize the transfer portal like the top programs do. She hasn't necessarily had to do that yet. And I think that's what's going to rub some people the wrong way about this hire. And I'm not saying that's unjustified. When this coaching search started, I also assumed, hey, they're going to go out and they're going to get someone that's been there, done that. And that's not necessarily what happened. But there are pros to getting someone that's young and unproven like this. One, if it works out, a long career ahead of them. Some of the names floating around, like a Wes Moore and some other names on the older end of things, no disrespect intended, but probably the coaching career is on the back end of things, let's just say. I don't know how long they would be able to be the Lady Vols head coach. Now you have a coach where for the foreseeable future and beyond, you would think that they would be here at Tennessee and be the head coach. And that is a positive. You have someone that this is their first major coaching job. Marshall's not a bad job by any means, and Division II it's not a bad job, but this is the cream of the crop at Tennessee. So you're getting someone that likely will not forget that. I guess you could say it's like a recruit when they don't forget their first offer type of deal, where even if they end up being a 5-star and going to a big name school, they don't forget that first offer they got. And maybe you see it in like the top 3 or top 4. It's a similar type of feeling, I think, when you're a coach and someone takes a chance on you, because this is Tennessee taking a chance on Kim Caldwell. And I think that if things work out, there wouldn't be a situation where, hey, well, this worked out. It was awesome. But like Lane Kiffin, I want to go to USC. That's been a dream school of mine. No, this is kind of the destination. So you have that situation as well playing in your favor. I think a lot of coaches look at Tennessee as a destination. It's definitely not like a stepping stone by any means or anything like that. It is a destination job throughout all sports. Tennessee is going to be a destination job, but it does help to maybe have some coaching security in a way that you feel like you have with this hire. But things got to go right. And this is a big hire for Danny White. It's a big hire for this program. It's your second kind of true coaching search in the modern era. You had Pat Summitt for all those years. When she's not able to coach anymore, Holly Warlick steps in, and that's just you looking for that seamless transition of someone that's already been on the staff. That doesn't work out. You go for a coaching search, and you grab an LVFL and Kelly Harper. She gets 5 seasons. That doesn't necessarily work out. She's let go, and now you're leaving that coaching tree. So this is a big moment for this program, for their future. You look back at other schools, even in other sports. Just because you have the history doesn't mean that you're kind of untouchable. You look at Indiana men's basketball. They were good for so long, and then all of a sudden now they can't sniff an NCAA tournament, and they're going through a rough patch. You look at like Nebraska football is kind of in the same way. We've seen it here in Knoxville with Tennessee football at times where you win the 98 championship. Fulmer, he's not the coach anymore. And then you go through a bunch of coaches, Derek Dooley's, Lane Kiffin's, Butch Jones, Jeremy Pruitt's, and that's a rough patch for about 2 decades until you finally get back to Josh Heupel and you get back on track and you beat Alabama and you're in New Year's Six bowls. But it can happen to these big name schools where if you make a couple wrong hires, then all of a sudden things start to maybe spiral, not out of control, but downward. This is that moment for Tennessee. If it works out, you saved it, and you can maybe return back to that national powerhouse Tennessee program where the expectations are so high. This is a shot, though, and if this shot doesn't work out, it'll be interesting to see where this program goes from there. You have the hardware, you have the facilities, you have the fan base, you have the will to win, but it's a similar situation in Tennessee football. You still got to make the right hire. We'll see if this is the right hire. She's going to have the tools to do it. But that kind of brings me to my next point. What are the realistic expectations? Danny White's laid out the long-term expectations, which is Sweet 16 isn't good enough. SEC title game appearances and semifinals, close games. That's not good enough for Lady Vols basketball. Danny White wants Tennessee to clearly be in Final Fours, to be competing for national championships, to be bringing SEC championships home. We've seen it with pretty much every other sport on campus recently. Men's basketball winning the SEC regular season title, baseball coming off a 2022 season where they were just easily the best team in the country, but ran out of steam in the super regionals, but they're always really competitive. Tennessee softball is bringing home a bunch of hardware. Football is returning back to national prominency. He wants the Lady Vols to go back to being at that level again. And how quickly that happens, I think, is interesting, and how much time you give for that to happen, I think, is interesting to discuss. Because what if Kim Caldwell has a very similar season to what Kelly Harper just had, which ultimately got her fired? Now, of course, doing that in your first year at a program compared to your fifth year is very different, and you have to look at it in different ways. Like when you look at Josh Heupel's first season, comparing it back to football, when he goes 7-5, there was a lot of smiles on Tennessee fans' faces. People were very okay with that. That was, all right, we're taking a step in the right direction back to where we want to be. Even though now if you go 7-5, obviously that's pretty unacceptable. I think a lot of Tennessee fans would say the bar has been moved and set higher. So where is that bar for year one for Kim Caldwell? I think it's probably pretty similar to last year. I think if you can make the NCAA tournament, win a game or two, be in contention for an SEC tournament title, you feel pretty good. I think how you would define a good season, though, for Kim Caldwell in her first season, you finish top 4 in the SEC regular season, so you get that bye into the quarterfinals. You win that first game at minimum in the SEC tournament, so you move on to the SEC tournament semifinals again. Depending on if you're the 4 seed and you catch another really good South Carolina team, it's understandable if you drop that game. But if you're a 2 or 3, I mean, hey, if you can get back to that finals game like Tennessee was 2 years ago, that's a really good start. And I don't think it's realistic to think that Tennessee goes into next year in the SEC, which very well may be the best women's basketball conference in the country, and they just do what they want and they win some titles and they bring home some hardware. But you should at least be in contention for it in your first season. That's the step you want to see. Because last year, the Lady Vols had a bad out of conference stretch. Of course, Rickea Jackson's not there. That hurts things. Tamari Key still working her way back from the blood clots that were found in her lungs the season before. So there are some circumstances that go along with it. But you had a bad out of conference stretch. You lost some SEC games you probably shouldn't have. You finish 5th in the seeding due to head-to-head with Alabama. And you lose a heartbreaker in the semifinals. That gets you a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament. You're not hosting, which stinks because that makes things a whole lot easier. Even Wes Moore, NC State head coach, who knocks out Tennessee in the round of 32, is talking about, hey, that Lady Vols team is a couple wins away from hosting, and then who knows what happens because it makes such a big difference. And he felt like it helped them win that game over the Lady Vols, being able to play in Raleigh at home in North Carolina. You're close to that, but you're not there. There's rumors you might have even been closer to a 7 or an 8 seed, according to some bracketologies. You have to take a step up from that if you're Kim Caldwell in your first year. You don't have to be a top 16 team and a top 4 seed and host, but you should at least be knocking on the door, right? You should be in contention for it down the stretch. It felt like this last year's Lady Vols team was never in contention to host after that MTSU loss, after you lost some games of out-of-conference play, Indiana, Ohio State. Some of those games kind of took you out of contention. And then when you parlay that with some losses in SEC play, it just kind of took it off the table, it feels like. You don't want to have that happen in the first year of the new head coach. Once again, I'm not saying this season's a failure if you're not a top 16 team and you don't win an SEC championship. But you want to take those steps towards that. And what will really define that, I think, is who she can get to stay, who she can get to transfer in, who she can get on the recruiting trail, because part of that also has to do with you building those stepping stones back into that contention. when she takes the job, is there a mass exodus to the portal? Do the players not like it? Do they do a lot of the big pieces with additional years of eligibility leave and look elsewhere, or do they stay? Does she bring in some Marshall players that were big impacts last year? I know one already decided on JMU. That was a big piece of what they did, but can you get some of those players to maybe follow you that are capable of playing at the SEC level, that maybe have some extra years of eligibility that you can help develop? Can you maybe get a couple commits in a recruiting class throughout this offseason or going into the season? Maybe get a Nyla Brooks back on board in the 2025 class, who was previously committed and then reopened her commitment after the Kelly Harper firing. What is that roster going to look like? What are you going to do for me in the first year? What are you going to be able to accomplish in that first year? And then I think that second year is maybe more of a year that you can judge what she does. So I think that's the bar. Want to be in contention, set up for next year. But Lady Vol fans are used to winning, and you can't blame them. They saw what Pat Summitt was able to do. They saw what it was like at the summit, no pun intended, of women's college basketball. So there's big standards here. It's not for everyone. It's like when Alabama football, Nick Saban retires, you bring Kellen DeBoer. Those are big shoes to fill. Those shoes are still big to fill in Knoxville, Tennessee for women's basketball. And it's not for everyone. Well, we'll find out what Kim Caldwell does in her Lady Vols tenure, as that has now become official. The Lady Vols' new head coach, Kim Caldwell, out of Marshall. She coached 7 seasons in Division II. She coached 1 at Marshall, and now she is the bright new upcoming Lady Vols head coach. Once again, let me know what you guys think. I'm very curious about kind of what the fan base reaction is. If you're not a Tennessee fan and you're watching this video or listening to this podcast, what's the outside perspective? I really am curious to hear what that perspective is, what those thoughts are, and then what is your bar? Where is that bar set for year 1 and beyond for Kim Caldwell? And what would make you satisfied with year 1 and beyond? So leave that in the comments. Head over to VolReport.com. We have content on everything UT Athletics. It's football. We just got done with the second spring scrimmage with Tennessee football over in Neyland Stadium. Talked to Josh Heupel afterwards. We've got spring practice content, videos, highlights, photos, discussions, articles, in-depth looks at different players and how they're developing with the freshmen, and then recruiting side of that as well. We have all of that for football. Obviously, women's basketball. We have the content here for women's basketball. We dive deep into it as this new era for Lady Vols basketball begins. On the men's side of things, we're keeping you up to date on the transfer portal. How is Tennessee going to kind of rebound from an Elite 8 loss to Purdue, where it was such a good season? You won the SEC regular season title. Well, now you lose Dalton Knecht, Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi. How can you rebound? Who are you going to get out of the portal? Are you going to add anyone next to Bishop Boswell in the recruiting class, and maybe in the 2025 class and beyond? We have men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball content we have going, as well as it's kind of Tony Vitello's stage right now in Knoxville with the other sports out of season. All eyes on Tony Vitello, even Tennessee softball content over at VolReport.com. So everything you need under the umbrella of Tennessee athletics, I'm telling you, it's over at VolReport.com. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thank you for watching.